What's up, Guardians, and welcome back, Hunters. I'm Profane, thanks for checking out the video. Today we're going to be taking an updated look at one of the best all-around Hunter builds that's available in Destiny 2 right now. With some of the recent updates that have come through here in the second act of Revenant, along with several new artifact mods, we've seen a significant rise in the performance of several arc-centric exotics and builds. One exotic that's really flourished with these changes have been the Mothkeeper wraps. This exotic was introduced back during Season of the Witch, and we've talked about its viability with a few different subclasses in the past, but with these recent changes, this exotic has never been as powerful. This comes with the Winged Eclipse intrinsic trait, which replaces our basic grenade with a special moth cage that contains 2 small moths. You'll have 2 charges, giving you the ability to spawn up to 4 loyal moths at a time. Your grenade cooldown time will be changed to a base of 73 seconds, no matter what grenade option you've chosen. But just like any standard grenade recharge time, we can reduce it through the use of certain abilities, fragments, and armor mods. The benefit in having these moths is that they can provide us with an instant overshield whenever the purple ones are created. Each application of the overshield will grant 22.5 health points, while providing us with a 70% increase to our overall damage resistance. So on a survival standpoint, this exotic can become extremely helpful towards keeping us and allies alive. But through an offensive mindset, these little moths will aggressively hunt down nearby targets, creating a powerful explosion on contact, which will blind all nearby enemies. Blinded enemies will remain disoriented for several seconds, making those targets and engagements much easier to manage. This will also stun unstoppable champions, so we've already got one champion type completely covered. The added dynamic of blinding enemies will be extremely cohesive to the use of the new Arc Compounding artifact mod, which will grant any source of arc damage with a 15% increase whenever used against blinded enemies. Since we're going to have plenty of moths flying around, this is a damage bonus that we'll be able to continuously trigger, and that's going to stack on top of several other damage bonuses that this Prismatic subclass and this new artifact will provide us. We'll talk more in depth about our weapon choices later in the video, but because we are using the Mothkeepers, we will gain a lot of benefits whenever using the Diris exotic grenade launcher. This generates its own moths on consecutive hits and final blows, which will significantly increase our capability of blinding enemies. And because we are using the Mothkeepers, the Diris will generate friendly purple moths as well, extending on our ability to keep ourselves and teammates alive and protected. The Diris recently saw some improvements to its overall performance. We didn't get the damage buff like we were hoping for, but this has been an exotic that has really stepped up here in Revenant. With the concussive reload mod equipped, this will trigger a 15% weakening debuff against high value targets, adding to the overall damage that we'll be able to deal when those enemies are blinded. And with the overload grenade launcher mod equipped, we'll even be able to stun overload champions. When it comes to our Prismatic subclass, we are utilizing Winter's Shroud and Stylish Executioner. Stylish Executioner will provide us with a means of becoming invisible, which can become a lifesaver in endgame content. But if you'd prefer to have more damage output, then I would recommend using Gunpowder Gamble to give us another throwable exploding item. Winter's Shroud will trigger a blast of slow to all nearby targets, and we're going to gain bonus class ability energy whenever we do slow targets. Keeping enemies slowed and frozen will result in a lot of additional damage for us, so we've also got Withering Blade selected. Since we are using Gambler's Dodge, this will mean that we'll be able to instantly regenerate our Withering Blade whenever dodging near enemies, giving us a reliable combo to slow and freeze targets. Having an abundant source of powered melees will work out great for us, since we are using the Facet of Dawn, which is going to trigger a 5-second radiance buff, giving all of our weapons, including the Diris, a 25% increase in overall damage, along with the ability to pierce barrier champion shields. To increase that damage output even further, we are using Facet of Courage, so once we have slowed or frozen an enemy, we will gain a 10% increase to any source of light damage. And we're not done giving this build extra sources of damage, because we've also got the Conductive Cosmic Crystal artifact mod, which is going to give us a 5% bonus in damage to all of our Arc and Void abilities whenever they're used against slowed and frozen enemies. So we started with a 15% increase to arc damage whenever it's used against blinded enemies. We've added a 15% weakening debuff, a 25% increase in weapon damage, along with a 5 and a 10% increase against slowed and frozen enemies. We're not going to be able to keep all of these bonuses active at all times against every enemy, and when these bonuses do stack, they are multiplied together, not just added. But in the situations where we can trigger all of these on the same target, we're looking at upwards of a 92% bonus in overall damage, which is absolutely incredible, making this build stronger than it's ever been. But I digress. Let's get back to our fragments. We've got Facet of Purpose equipped, which is going to grant us with either Frost Armor or a Void Overshield. We intend on using Silence and Squall or Tether as our selected supers, so based on which one of these we're using, we'll gain a different form of damage resistance. Ultimately, I find Overshields to be much more beneficial for survivability, but Silence and Squall would give us more opportunities to cash in on some of our damage bonuses. To improve the regeneration rates of our abilities, we are using Facet of Balance, which will grant us with both melee and grenade energy as we defeat enemies with either light or dark based abilities. We've also got Facet of Awakening equipped, which will cause elemental pickups to be created, which will grant us even more energy. This means we'll be able to create Void Breaches, Ionic Traces, and Stasis Shards, so we'll be gaining extra melee, grenade, and class ability energy. Between these two fragments, we'll maximize on our ability to slow and freeze enemies, to trigger Radiance, and to have our grenade energy available more often. And that's going to carry over into our selection of armor mods, where our main goal is to amplify our grenade production as much as possible. So to that extent, we have elected to use Grenade Kickstart, which will convert armor charges into grenade energy, allowing us to throw out more moth cages. We'll gain armor charges through the use of Siphon Helmet mods, Firepower Gloves mods, and Reaper class item mods. Armor charges are also going to be incredibly useful towards our ammo economy of Diris, since we are using the Special Finisher class item mod. We've also thrown on a few special ammo finder mods to ensure that we're always loaded up on grenade launcher ammo. Outside of our choices in armor mods, our choice in character stats comes down to resilience, discipline, and mobility. Tier 10 resilience will reduce incoming damage by 30%, and by having Tier 10 mobility, we're going to have the lowest possible cooldown time of our dodge. With our dodge recharging our melee energy, we can avoid having to focus any stats towards strength, freeing us up to devote more towards our discipline, helping us keep a steady supply of moths covering the battlefield. Now that we've covered our prismatic class tree, artifact mods, and armor, the only thing left to discuss is our weapon situation. Obviously, the Diris is the central focus, so when it comes to legendary weapons, we're going to utilize a stasis weapon in the kinetic slot, preferably one that comes with headstone, so that we can extend on our ability to slow and freeze enemies. And I would recommend weapons like the Prolonged Engagement SMG or the Jiraka Scout Rifle. And when it comes to our choice in heavy weapon, we're going to go with a grenade launcher like the Bittersweet or the Hullabaloo. Having perks like Volt Shot or Jolting Feedback would be ideal so that we could spread more arc damage through our enemies, cashing in on that bonus damage when they're blinded. Additionally, weapons with Demolitionist would help increase our overall production of moths, so be sure to keep an eye out for that with primary and heavy weapons. Whether you need a build to take on Grandmaster Nightfalls, dungeons, or raids, you'll find a ton of success out of using the Mothkeepers here in Revenant. So if you haven't checked out this build yet, then be sure you do, and once you have, let us know what you thought of it. If you need any help putting together today's build, then be sure to check out my Mobalytics link that's down in the description, where you'll be able to find this and a ton of other great endgame builds. That's going to wrap up things with today's video, but thank you as always for checking it out. If you enjoyed and found it helpful, then be sure to hit that like button below, along with the subscribe button if you're new. Both are greatly appreciated, and both really do help support the channel. And until next time, Guardians, this has been Profane, wishing you all some happy hunting.